Why, hello there, and welcome to Spoiler Piece Theater, the podcast that doesn't give a shit about spoilers. We just want to talk about the movies. My name is Dave Riedel. My pronouns are he, him. I write about movies, and I'm a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association.
My name is Evan Crean. My pronouns are he, him. I am co-chair of the Boston Online Film Critics Association, co-author of Your 80s Movie Guide to Better Living, and co-host of the It's the Pictures podcast.
And my name is Megan Kearns. My pronouns are she, her. I write film reviews for Edge Media Network. I'm a co-host of the Slashers podcast. I too am a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association, and I'm a member of Gallica, the Society of LGBTQ Entertainment Critics.
Yowza. I haven't thrown a yowza out there in a while.
I love a yowza. Love a good yowza.
Yeah. Yowza. That's my Axl Rose. So this week on the show, we are talking about some movies. But before we do that, we want to direct you over to our Patreon, where in honor of its 10th anniversary, we are lauding John Wick. Because what else can you do with a movie like that except be like, it's so good. It's fucking great. Over and over and over again. That's what we do for a half hour, just so you know. But it's fun.
It is.
So if you're a patron, please go check it out. And if you're not a patron, please consider becoming one. We also get into lots of tangents about the other three John Wicks because we just can't help ourselves. And I, of course, get into fucking Back to the Future. So if any of that sounds appealing to you, check it out. And while I'm on the subject of patrons, we want to thank our sponsor piece patron, Heather Sachs.
Thanks, Heather.
Thanks, Heather.
And on to the movies. This week, Megan will regale us with tales of Heretic, starring Hugh Grant. We will be discussing a Nick Frost psychological horror film called Black Cab. Not Black Cat, Black Cab. And we will be discussing the new movie starring Cillian Murphy, Small Things Like These. But first, Megan's going to start us off with Heretic. So, Megan, what you got? All
right. So, first of all, before I even get into the premise of this movie, it's a horror movie. As you said, it stars Hugh Grant. Sophie Thatcher and Chloe East are also in this. This movie is fucking great. So now I'll get into the premise of it. This is from A24's press release. Two young missionaries are forced to prove their faith when they knock on the wrong door and are greeted by a diabolical Mr. Reed, played by Hugh Grant, becoming ensnared in his deadly game of cat and mouse. This might be Hugh Grant's performance of a lifetime.
Ooh.
I've always liked Hugh Grant. I think he is a delight. I like him in rom-coms from the 90s and the 2000s. I love his turn into, kind of kooky, idiosyncratic characters now. And this role, he just sinks into and puts on the show of a lifetime. It's great. It is so great. It starts off where these two missionary girls, they're Mormons, and so they're out doing their rounds of kind of proselytizing, and he has previously somehow communicated with their branch that he wants to get some more information. And so we get a little bit of them talking about their faith and their lives. And then they bike over on their bicycles to, not like motorbikes, but they bicycle over to his house, and he answers the door, and he's like so like charming, but like self-effacing, like stereotypical Hugh Grant, like what you would see in like rom-com Hugh Grant. And they're like, oh, he's like, come in. And they're like, oh, well, is it just you? Because, we can't be alone with you because you're a man. And he's like, oh, my wife is baking. She's in the other room. It's totally fine. She'll come out. So they're like, okay, we'll come in. So they go in and they can smell something baking. They smell blueberry pie, which, by the way, at the screening I attended, and certain screenings will have this, there was a scratch and sniff card of blueberry pie that you're supposed
They're
to
gonna
smell.
Say smell-o-vision.
No, no, but that would have been good too. But yeah, it's a scratch and sniff card. So like when he brings the drinks to them, you're supposed to smell the card about the blueberry pie that's baking in the oven. And so He's talking to them, and he's very nice, very lovely, but kind of evasive, and asking lots of questions, which is nothing wrong with that. But they're kind of like, hey, can your wife come out? Like we said, we can't be alone with you. And he's like, oh yeah, she's just shy. And so he's like, let me go check on that pie. And one of the women, she turns something around on the coffee table and sees that it's just a candle. That's a blueberry scented candle. And they start getting like the ick, like, oh shit, something's not right. And oh God, is it not? Because he traps them in the house and tells them that he can't open the front door because it's on a timer lock, and he's already
Oh boy.
he's already locked it for the night, and so it won't open again until the next day. Oh, but they can go out the back doorway. And so he leads them through the house. And the house in and of itself is really fantastic in its production design. It's very detailed. There's a lot of kind of unique, strange things that you see. I very much want to watch this again so I can pick up more things. But yeah, so then he's like, okay. And then there's 2 doors and you have to pick which door. And they're like, wait, what? And he's like, yeah, you got to pick which door. And he's like, one of the doors is for believers and one of the doors for disbelievers. And you need to choose. And
oh boy.
yeah, and then it leads into this really creepy basement. And there's a pit there. And so the whole thing is, the entire movie is basically him challenging them on their theological beliefs. And he is very well versed. He knows all about Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Mormonism. He knows about all of the religions. He has studied extensively. And so anything that he asks them that they have answers for, he can counter and he can challenge them. And it's really fascinating to see this back and forth between them. And they're obviously terrified because they're like, what is going to happen? We're trapped here. We need to get out. And he is just very manipulative and very malevolent. And it's really fascinating to watch and have this unfold. So I really liked this. I thought that the theological conversations were great. This film is 10 years in the making because the filmmakers Scott Beck and Brian Woods, who wrote and directed this, they wanted to do this 10 years ago, but they realized they didn't know enough about religion and theology to do this justice. So they spent 10 years while they're working on other films studying philosophy and religion, which I think is very evident when you watch this, just how intricate their writing and knowledge of this is or has become. And this is just such a great performance by Hugh Grant. The 2 young women are great too, Sophie Thatcher and Chloe East. They're really good. The movie is really unnerving and creepy, and there's kind of like this unsettling malevolence happening throughout. You just have this kind of like the shudder the whole time. Yeah, so I really liked this. I thought it was great.
Very cool. I just realized I recognized their names finally. These guys wrote A Quiet Place.
Yes, they did.
Okay. Because I heard their names. I'm like, I think I know those names. And then you said they were doing other things. I'm like, that's right. They're not just podunk dudes. They wrote A Quiet Place.
They did, yes.
Well, I had wanted to see this. I couldn't make the screening. You have double spoiler pieced me into it because I already wanted to see it.
Same.
Ooh.
So now I'm going to see it twice.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm very
I'm
curious.
Watch for 2.
That's right.
I'm very curious what you both think of the ending. Because I've still been mulling it over kind of a week later, and I'm not entirely sure it fully works, but it's given me enough to ponder that I kind of don't care if it doesn't entirely come together. But yeah, and Hugh Grant is he's so great in it. I know so many people have been praising his performance, but he really is great in it. So good.
Yeah, I love latter-day Hugh Grant. especially when
Yeah.
he's been playing, I can't remember, I think it was a Guy Ritchie movie that he was just this.
Yes, the
fucking-
gentleman.
Yes, he was just such a fucking asshole.
Yeah,
I mean-
he was.
He's
So
yeah.
it was really interesting. So I read 3 different interviews with the filmmakers where they were talking about the making of this, and they said that Hugh Grant had such an intense process in acting. Like they had this very extensive back and forth via email as he was going through the script and asking questions for clarity for his character. Like, oh, what part of the world is this guy from? Or, oh, what would he think about this? And like, and then they were also saying that, that like when they would do a take, they would there'd be like 10 pages of material to cover, and they'd be like, okay, that's a lot, we'll just do 5. And he would like be like, okay, and then he would just bang out all 10 in like a monologue, and he would like nail it. And yeah, they just said it was really great to work with him, and that he was so good. Yeah, and I think it shows on screen because he gives a great performance.
Very cool. Yeah. All right. I'm looking forward to Heretic. But am I
hope
looking
you like it.
Yeah, me too. But am I looking forward to Black Cab? Let's talk about Black Cab. That is our second movie of the night. It's another horror movie. You see a theme yet, kids? So let me read you the our last movie is not a horror movie. There's no theme.
It's horrifying.
It's horrifying. That's true.
Mhm.
So Black Cab. This stars Nick Frost, who outside of Edgar Wright movies, I think I've only seen him in whatever the movie is he's in with Rashida Jones, where they're like dancing, they're competitive dancers. I don't know what it's called. Anyway, this
He's
is
a
Black Cab.
competitive dancer. Sorry, my mind is blown. I don't know this movie.
Yeah,
Yeah, me neither.
I think that's what it is. They're dancers. I don't remember if they're partners and they're competing in something, or more to be determined, kids. So let's talk about Black Cab, though.
Mhm.
Here's your one sentence IMDb summary. A couple who find their jovial cab driver diverts them to a remote, haunted road, revealing disturbing motives and his true intentions. I mean, that's kind of vague. I mean, that's true.
Yeah,
It's kind of vague.
kind of vague. Yeah.
So I guess I should give you the 10-cent tour, the 10-cent tour. There's this couple. I can't remember her name. Anne.
Sophie. Oh, that's right.
Anne and Patrick. Yeah, Anne and Patrick, and they're this couple, and Patrick is a real shit, which you learn within the first 30 seconds of seeing him, because they're at dinner with friends, and he's just telling this story that I don't even remember the story, but it's awful. And
It is awful.
and he slaps, Anne's friend on the thigh in the middle of it, and it's like, you. Meanwhile, I forgot to mention she has had a nightmare before this dinner where she is in a cab and she sees like a ghostly figure on the side of the road, foreshadowing much. So
Mhm. I think she's also pregnant in that nightmare too.
Yes, she is.
She is. Right. So we're back to the thing. So it becomes clear, because they just tell you outright, that Patrick and Anne had a falling out or had broken up or something. And he tells the 2 friends they're out to dinner with that, no, I'm moving back into Anne's, and we're engaged, which clearly Anne doesn't know.
Well, you see when she talks to him on the phone after the nightmare, she says something to the effect of, I'm still deciding, basically, and he's still talking, and she hangs up the phone while he's still talking. And then when they're at dinner, yeah, it's clear that he proposed to her, but she didn't say yes, and she definitely didn't want to bring it up in front of her friends like she had said yes.
Right. And so they get into some kind of like fight as they're like outside waiting for a cab, and Nick Frost rolls up, and he's driving a typical English black cab, gets them in there, and Patrick is such an asshole, and eventually he starts driving him down this road, and then he's like, oh, if you're going to this place, I got to get a map out of my trunk. And because of course he doesn't have Google or whatever. I mean, have you ever been in a black cab? Have you guys done that in London?
No.
I don't
No.
think I have.
The doors do lock the moment you get in. It's not.
That's disturbing.
Well,
Okay,
I think
because I was
it's.
going to say it seemed weird that they get into the cab and right away the door locks behind them, and I thought, wouldn't this be red flag number one? That immediately, like, she's in the cabin locked inside and can't get out when she wants to get out, and then he gets in the cab. Like, that should that, to me is red flag number one. Door is locked, can't get out from the inside of cab.
I think it's so that you can't jump out of the cab in the middle of the ride.
Yeah, a lot of Uber drivers will lock the doors too.
Yeah. Well, I remember back when I lived in New York, cab drivers would lock the doors too, and so when that
Which is
happens, I'm just
alarming,
it's alarming,
nonetheless.
but at the same time, I was just kind of like, well, that happens.
Right. But then he locks the doors again when he
Yeah.
pulls over in that like really shady looking neighborhood. Because he's like, first he's like, I just take a phone call, and they're like, they both want to get out of the cab, and he won't unlock the door to let them out.
Yeah. And then they were originally going to go to her home, or Patrick was trying to bully Anne into, going home with her. And Nick Frost is kind of acting like he's, like he's, all about protecting Anne from Patrick. He's like, well, I'll take you to your place, and then, I'll call a cab for him, or, I'll just take him home afterward. But let me get my map. I don't know exactly. So he goes to the trunk, and Patrick's like, this is fucking weird. And Anne's like, well, he is actually getting a map out. And then he comes around to the side of the car, and he's got the world's biggest taser that apparently is homemade in some Eastern European country that I can't remember the name of. And he just zaps Patrick in the stomach and really fucks him up. And he zip ties both of them. And then he's driving him out in this road, and he starts telling this story about this ghostly woman who, she was out in a cab, and she got out of the cab with her baby, and her baby went missing, and she's been looking for her baby. Like, she died, and then they never found that baby. So she's out there looking for her baby. And Anne's like, what the fuck? Meanwhile, he has said, oh, I think I know you, because I think I picked you up from the maternity hospital. And she's like, I don't think so. And he's like, no, definitely. And then they show the flashback, and it's true, and so this whole thing is like a convoluted. Well, it's not convoluted. This whole thing is like,
I'd say it's convoluted.
It's convoluted-esque. Well, the mythology kind of changes, and there's this point at which you have to decide, is Anne actually the ghost and she's having a subjective memory of herself? Or is she becoming this because of what Nick Frost is, spilling out? Because Anne keeps seeing the ghost in like the side mirror, and at some point the ghost's hands come up and wrap themselves around Anne's waist. And Nick Frost is, I couldn't tell whether he's killed his wife and son or whether he actually was kicked out, but it's been so long that he's like not at home anymore. But then there's that he's having that flashback where, he's watching the ghost over his son, but then he looks at one point and then he's watching over his son and he's the evil one. And it's like, what the fuck? So it ends up with
the convoluted stuff.
Yeah. It ends up with him taking them to this like weird house, which must be pretty far outside London, because London kind of goes on forever. At least now it does. And ends up eventually slitting Patrick's throat in a pretty good looking kill, I got to say, for a movie that clearly doesn't have a big budge. And he's chasing Anne around, and Anne escapes, and she gets into the cab, and then he catches her, and then he's like, I'm going to take you out to her, and you're going to give her the baby, and I'm going to get my boy back. And meanwhile, he's been calling his wife, whose name is Elaine, if I recall correctly, like the whole time, and she's not picking up. And after, Anne gets out of the cab, and like the ghost is there in the middle of the street, and then Anne's like, you took my baby, because we find out, of course, that Anne had a miscarriage. And so she's not pregnant. And so Nick Frost's plan is thwarted. But then Anne starts yelling at the ghost, being like, you took my baby, give my baby back to me.
Right.
And
chases the ghost into the wood, or runs into the woods, frantically and angrily, ready to, like, I don't even know, punch the ghost. I don't know what you do to a ghost when you're mad at it.
yeah, and then she, Nick Frost is like, "Hey, where'd she go?" And he starts, and Elaine calls him, and he doesn't answer the phone. He's like, "Oh, she called me," and I'm like, "Did she really call him? Is he hallucinating this whole thing? Like, what the fuck is going on?"
Yeah, not clear.
And then he hits Anne with the car, or the cab rather. But then, well, a cab is a car. But when he gets out, she's not there, of course, and he's like, "Oh well," and he just like drives off.
And she's as a ghost in the back seat of the cab now,
Yeah.
or something.
And it's like, what did I just watch? I mean,
yeah,
this movie is simultaneously captivating, mostly because of Nick Frost's performance, and completely fucking stupid because
that's a great description of it, actually.
captivating and completely fucking stupid.
Yeah, that's a great description of it, because I feel like while I was watching it, I was just thinking, I'm into the vibe that this movie is putting out there. It's very creepy. Like, it has a creepy score. It uses the inside of the cab very effectively. Some creative shots in and out of the cab. And I wanted to see where it was going, because I thought, Nick Frost is very charismatic and also can be very menacing. But I also was like, where the fuck is this going? And then when, we're talking about the ending, I felt like I was just kind of a head scratcher where I wasn't quite sure what was going on, what to make of it. And then, like, I looked at Shauna and I was like, what do you think? She's like, I fucking hated it. And she's like, I hate that this movie is like two movies in one, where it's like, pick a lane. It's like, is it either going to be the, deranged, unhinged guy kidnaps this couple and just wants to torture them or do, horrible stuff to them? Or is it a ghost story? Because she's right. It doesn't effectively do either one while trying to do both at the same time. At least that's how I also felt after watching it. Like, I was in it. I wanted to see where it went, that it didn't go anywhere interesting, and I was just mad because I just didn't feel like it did either angle particularly well.
Megan is over here making some faces. It's mostly just a smirk, but
I couldn't stand this. I thought it was awful. I didn't like anything about this except for one shot. There's a great shot of Anne's eye, an extreme close-up of her eye, and you see the gas station in the reflection, and it zooming out as they drive away. That's a great shot. That shot is great. Everything else I could not stand. Even Nick Frost did not like him. Didn't like the dialogue, didn't like any of the cinematography aside from that one shot, which is spectacular. Yeah, this sadly did not work for me at all.
His character is insufferable, but
I mean, and I guess you could argue that's the point, but I just don't think it's done effectively. Like, just none of it worked for me. The acting didn't work for me, the writing, nothing.
Yeah, well,
just nothing.
Yeah, I thought the guy who played Patrick was not good.
No, not at all.
And I also, people stay with terrible people all the time, but it's so clear that she doesn't even like him. It's like,
right.
I don't even know what this is. And I usually don't mind. In fact, I kind of prefer sometimes when things happen in horror movies that are never explained, because it's like, this is just horrific, whatever. But this is not unexplained. This is opaque. It's like, I don't know why. I mean, how did he know they were at the restaurant? Does he even explain that?
No. It seems like maybe he's been following her around, but I don't know how.
Yeah.
Or is it supernaturally? Like, did the ghost tell him?
Yeah, because the ghost is always in his head, or was in his head.
Right. So did the ghost tell him, hey, she's there? Yeah, she does.
Yeah, but she does see it. And it's funny, I did remember seeing someone riding in the back of the cab when she said, yeah, there was somebody in the cab before me. He's like, no, there wasn't. I was like, yes, there was. I saw that lady in there.
Yeah. So, yeah. Captivating and completely fucking stupid. I'm going to write that on my letterbox review.
That's a great.
Except for me, I didn't find it captivating at all.
Right, yours just plain completely
fucking stupid.
Yeah, just stupid. But I'm glad that you guys got something out of it.
Well,
I wish I had.
For me, it was mostly just like, I was like, where the fuck is
Where's
this
this
going?
going? Yeah.
Because every time that Nick Frost started to get on my nerves, something else would happen and he would be less on my nerves. And I'd be like, oh, like when they go to the gas station and she's Patrick is woken up from his tase from hell. And
His tase.
yeah. And she's like, all right, when he opens the door, like we'll scream and someone will hear us. And I was like, oh yeah, that could work. I mean, it's not going to because it's a horror movie. But
Right.
and then Patrick like passes out and she's like looking through the window and he comes through and he's like, hey, I see you. And he draws a little like heart in the condensation on the window. And it's just bizarre. And I was just like, I just don't understand. And would he have picked any woman who he thought was pregnant? I mean, did he have some special connection to Anne?
Just other than the fact that he picked her up before? Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah. So,
Yep. Don't know. And like, what's the deal with Anne now? Anne's a ghost? When he,
hit her with the car.
her, did he kill her? But then why did her body disappear?
Right. Did he hallucinate that?
Right. So that part made absolutely no sense to me.
Did
Like,
he
it made sense
hallucinate
in
the whole thing?
Oh.
Yeah. Could be.
So is Anne really just fine back home in bed?
Maybe
knows?
maybe it's like the ending of Saint Elsewhere, where he looks into a snow globe.
No, the snow globe.
Yeah.
The thing of it is that I'm with you, Dave. Like, I don't need everything spelled out. I like ambiguity, but for me, this is beyond ambiguity. It just feels unfinished, and I also just didn't care. I'm like, oh well, okay, she's a ghost, or she's fine, or she's not, or he hallucinated. Don't care.
Yeah.
Don't care about anybody in this.
Yeah. It's not good. But that's all right. Movies aren't good sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah, it happens. I will say I respected that he destroyed their phones, because I know that's always a thing now in horror movies where they're like, oh, well, you have a phone. You can easily, find your way out of this. And often it's like, oh, well, they didn't have reception, or they can't send a text to 911. This time he just destroyed their phones and just took them out of the equation immediately.
Yeah, that's true.
That comes up in Heretic too. Just
does it?
Bringing it back to
Nice.
Heretic for a second. Yes, because he asks them something and they're like, oh, we have to leave. We got a phone call from our superior. We have to head back. They need us. And he's like, oh, really? Oh, okay. And then he's like, but I know you're lying. You don't need to lie. You can tell me the truth. And they're like, no, we're not. And he's like, no, before you came in, I asked if you were okay with all the metal in the house. And he's like, the metal prevents a signal in your phone. So I know you didn't get a phone call from anybody. So the old I can't get a signal on my cell phone trick works and happens in that one too.
Nice.
Well, okay. Does anybody have any closing thoughts on whatever the fuck this is called? Black Cab? Black Cab. Or Hackney Cab, I guess.
Yeah, the premise sounded good to me, but
same. That's why I wanted to see it.
Yeah.
But I'm on Shauna's page with the whole, pick a lane. Because it's haphazard and messy for no good reason.
It is messy. That's a perfect word.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Well, moving on from messy to a messy subject, but a not messy movie, maybe. We are talking about I really worked that one. We're talking about Small Things Like These, which stars Cillian Murphy and Emily Watson. It's based on the novel by Claire Keegan, which I actually remember being a big deal a couple of years ago. And here is your one-sentence IMDb summary. In 1985, devoted father Bill Furlong, that's your name? Bill Furlong discovers disturbing secrets kept by the town convent and uncovers shocking truths of his own. Yeah. So, Bill delivers coal.
He owns a company, yeah.
And does he own the company? I missed that.
It's called Furlongs. Yeah.
Oh, it is, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Pardon me for not having seen that. He owns the company, and his wife is kind of terrible. which is kind of one thing that I don't like.
I was not expecting that.
It's one thing that, I mean, I liked this well enough. That doesn't really work for me because it's like, I mean, I guess you need an antagonist, but aren't the nuns the antagonists?
Yeah, no,
Yes.
his wife is the worst. I just wasn't expecting that straight out of the gate. So
Yeah,
I
same.
agree. It just surprised me.
I thought you were going to be like, well, he has 1 million children. I think he has, 6 children?
6, 7, yeah.
Yeah. And they're all, going to school, and a couple of them are working, and, he goes to visit them at work, and, I mean, I would say, yes, devoted father. That's a good description of him, because he clearly is like, my children are great. And every day when he comes home, he fills the sink with water and scrubs his hands and scrubs and scrubs and scrubs.
Boy, does
Yep.
he.
And it's like, I think you're going to take your skin off there, Bill. But
Right. This is before we had lava, the pumice soap to get all the hard to get out grime.
Right. I guess the first thing that happens is he's over at the convent, and I don't know if he's dropping off a delivery or if he's giving them their bill, but he sees some of the women, young women there, like scrubbing the floors. And he's like, I don't really think they're supposed to be doing. He doesn't say anything because he's. Go ahead, Evan.
I was going to say, a woman comes up to him and just says, "Please get me out of here. Please, I'll do whatever. Just get me out of here."
Well, and she's like, take me to the river and get me to the other side of the river. And he's like, what? And then one of the nuns comes up and she's like, get the fuck out of here. Which is weird because nuns don't talk that way. But she doesn't say that. I think that they tell him that she's mentally ill, right? Don't they say that she's not hallucinating, but that she's, manic or something? I don't recall how they explain it away to him.
Yeah, I don't recall that.
No, it's the second woman. It's the woman that he finds in the shed that they say is like unwell. That's it. He finds a second woman locked in a shed, and it's freezing. And she's freezing, and he's like, what the hell? I think that she says she's been out there all night. So, and she's also like, what about the baby? And he's like, what baby? He doesn't say what baby. I'm sorry. That's when the Mother Superior, who is Emily Watson, is like, oh, she's ill. Don't take anything that she says seriously. And he, of course, this being a small town, she's known him his whole life, knows his wife, knows their children. If not, I was going to use the word intimately, but that feels strange. Not like all of them super well, because some of them have gone to the school associated with a convent, some of them haven't. And then I think he finds. I watched this a couple days ago, so I'm having a little trouble. But the Mother Superior gives him a big tip this winter.
Yes.
Yeah, she tries to buy him off because even though he hasn't seen a lot, it's clear that there's definitely some unsavory things, some abuses going on, particularly to this woman, Sarah, who he, I think, feels attachment for because his mother who died, her name was also Sarah.
And
but
she was a teen mother in Ireland,
Yeah, and she was taken in by, it seems like her boyfriend's like wealthy family, and after she died, the family raised him. That's another thing in this movie. There's a lot of like flashbacks to his childhood, kind of connecting back to the present, and it's clear that like the trauma of losing his mother and kind of being raised in an adoptive home, which I think was a loving home, but how he feels a responsibility to take care of others in the way in that he just wants to help other people and help give them a leg up.
Yeah.
So there's that going on. But yeah, the nun, when they sit down by the fire, she makes kind of like a not so thinly veiled threat to him about like if he talks
school
about his other kids that are supposed to go to the school, like, oh, it's very competitive, maybe they won't get in and get a good education here like your older daughters have.
Yeah.
And then she goes, oh, here here's this card with like a fat stack of cash. Give this to your wife.
Well, and when
Basically,
he
like
gives it to
buying his silence.
there's so much cash in it. It's
yeah,
like
it's a lot.
and his wife is like, I hope you said thank you. And he's like, But the scene that has stuck with me, the scene that I do remember very well, is him sitting down in that barber chair toward the end of the movie and that one single tear falling out of his eye. And like, he's got to get up and go, you know, he finds Sarah again. And this time he takes her in. And I mean, that's how this is a short movie. It's like 95 minutes long. And it ends with him taking Sarah in. We don't know how the wife responds.
Well, I was going to say, it's what? Is it actually Christmas or Christmas Eve? I can't remember. It's actually that point.
It's Christmas.
But yeah.
Yeah.
He brings her home. He does his usual wash his hands ritual, and you see him walk her down the hallway toward the family room where you hear everyone talking. And then the last kind of shot is you see them turn the corner, and then you hear everyone stop talking.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is a hard movie. I mean, it's sad in a good way. It kind of reminds me of, I can't remember what the name of the movie is, about the little girl who goes to live with the Quiet Girl.
Yes.
It's kind of heartbreaking in the same way.
Yeah.
And I have always liked Cillian Murphy. The first thing I ever saw him in was 28 Days Later.
Me too.
Oh, same here.
Me too.
And then Sunshine.
Sunshine, yeah. He's such a fine actor. I mean,
he's excellent.
He's so good. And he's so understated in this role. I mean, to the point that sometimes the less kind part of myself was like, would you do something with your face there, Bill? but it's not. But it all kind of comes, I mean, that single tear, I don't know. I don't think those were glycerin drops, you know? I think he did that on camera. So
I mean, I think this whole entire film, he's on the verge
absolutely
of just sobbing, just having
the trauma's
breakdown
like right there. I almost feel like the flashbacks are him actually remembering it in that moment, you know?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But so I think it is such a restrained performance, but it's somehow simultaneously so full of effusive emotion, because it's very much written all over his body and his face, just the weight of the pain of having a mother who not only died, but the fact that she was unwed, and that he is painfully aware that if she and he hadn't been taken in by the family, played by Michelle Fairley, who's got a small role but is great here, that he would have been out on the streets, like that, you know, because that's what happened. Or his mother would have been,
you know,
exactly.
He gives money to the one little boy. He sees the other little boy like drinking the dog's or the cat's like milk from
the dog
the
bowl.
stoop.
Yeah. But and that's the thing, because that's what happened to unwed mothers. They got sent to the Magdalene laundries, which is exactly what this is. And so, you know, it's horrifying. And the fact that he has so much empathy for these girls is great. But I think it's, as heartbreaking as that is and wonderful, it's so also equally disgusting and disturbing that his wife and the bartender, who is also a woman, are both like, you don't want to get involved. Like, you just have to get along to get along, you know, and stay in your lane. And sometimes you have to, the wife says, sometimes you have to ignore things to live in this world. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like,
yeah, that was super messed up, especially when she launches into like, oh, this wouldn't happen to any of our daughters. And he's like, no, like this could happen to anyone.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And the fact that he has so much empathy, and like everybody else is just like, oh, whoops, this happens. Like, it's just, it's horrifying, but it's also, you know, it's awful. Anyway. Those poor girls.
Yeah, this is definitely a based, I know the book only came out 3 or 4 years ago, and it just, I kind of feel like in Irish culture, let's just call it, there's like a line of demarcation before everybody knew about the abuses and after. And this is so clearly written after, as like kind of an examination of that. And it's just, it's so heartbreaking.
I mean, it's still so fresh. They stopped happening in
The
1998.
90s. Yeah.
Like, that's crazy. And there was
Mhm.
something like in 2013, there was kind of like a reconciliation to try to give money to the survivors, and which the Catholic Church wanted like no part in participating in. But I'm like, this is not ancient history. Like, this is still very much current, which is just wild.
Yeah. And to listeners, if you're not familiar with this, so like in Ireland, there were these convents, and they would take, teenage girls who are pregnant, and their parents and families often would force them to go to the convent, and they'd have to stay there, work, have the baby, and then their baby would be given away, and then they would not know what happened to that baby.
Isn't that
and
Philomena?
So, like,
is that what that movie? Remember?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, very similar. Yeah, and sometimes they were told that the child died, even though the child didn't, and then they were like adopted out, and they never, knew what happened to their children, and so it's pretty extensive abuse that was happening over a very long period of time.
Yeah, it also would happen. Oh, I'm sorry.
People are just turning looking the other way while this was happening.
It also would happen to not just unwed mothers. It also started happening to other girls if their families wanted to dump them, like if they were, quote, difficult.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. So this movie feels really lived in. Also, I felt like I think the cinematography is really well done with how Bill's family's home is kind of earthy, and which is not to say that it's like dirty or anything. It's just it's modest and et cetera, et cetera. Right. And then the home that he was raised in, they had money, and and like the colors are vibrant, not like overstated, but bright green dress, red shoes, things like that. And the contrast between the two, and then you have the convent, which is just dour. It's just everything about it is
gray.
Just gray or dark. When they go into the Mother Superior's office, and she's like, "Come sit by the fire," it's like the whole room is like shrouded in almost like an evil dark, and then to get this bright orange fire like illuminating her like Satan. It's just like
that scene is actually, I felt it was chilling. Like that
for
scene
sure.
It was absolutely chilling,
disturbing, and just like, oh my god, she's gonna like, she's not gonna do anything, but like other than threaten. But it felt like she was gonna like straight up murder somebody. Like it was so tense.
Yeah.
When he's hyperventilating in the car or in the truck on the way back, it felt very real, like a very real visceral reaction to such a tense meeting where you feel like you say or do the wrong thing and the world just will come crashing down on you.
Yeah. It's such a great scene, but such an ominous one.
Yeah. By the way, I was kind of half kidding when I was like, "Bill, do something with your face." I just want to get that out there. I just always, when roles are so understated, a lot of times I kind of look for things to be like, "Oh, come on," So I shouldn't tease Cillian Murphy, because he, like I said, he is such a fine actor. Fine in the true meaning of fine,
right?
Not fine. Meh. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so yeah, this is like a real heartbreaker. I wonder if Sarah's life is going to get any better, or if it's just they're going to do Christmas there and then it's all over. Because
good question.
Bill's wife is not playing along with like the vibe Bill's laying down. Like, she admonishes him for giving that boy that he sees on the road change.
She calls him too soft-hearted.
Yeah. Yep. I don't think you can be too soft-hearted personally, but
no. I
but
agree.
that's just me.
Not a thing.
Like my older guy, Henry, is such a kind, sweet little boy. If anybody tries to take that away from him, I'm not really sure what I'll do, but it won't be pretty. And so I just, to see Bill just have this internal turmoil because of what he's witnessing. And God, the scene where he gets like the hot water bottle for Christmas.
Oh yeah,
Oh God.
that's rough.
Yeah. Anyway. Does anybody have things they want to add? I'm sure there's
Yes.
more. Please do.
Mhm.
I was like, Evan, I actually want to talk about what you had written in your Letterboxd review, where you had said that you wished that that the film had focused more on the victims.
Yeah,
Mm.
I didn't realize this was based on a novel. It kind of makes sense that it has a male point of view if it's based on a particular source material where, Bill is at the center of the story as opposed to the victims. But it is an interesting contrast for me because I did see there was a show on Paramount Plus called The Woman in the Wall, which is it's also, fictional, but based, on these real abuses. And it's a thriller as opposed to a drama, but it's about the women who went through this and were affected by it. And it's a story centered on the victims, both a woman who goes through it, and one of the characters is also a child who was adopted out of one of these, Magdalene institutions. And so what I found really effective about that show was that it's all about the victims and the trauma and how do they heal, how do they move on. It's also kind of a thriller from how do we uncover all these abuses, how do we figure out what happened to these kids. And so I thought that was all really, really interesting. And I wish there was, if we're going to stay close to the source material, fine, but I just wish that there was more about the abuse that was happening, or at least more emotional energy spent on Sarah, someone who's going through the abuse, because I don't think, knowing what I know about that other show and having more context for what was going on here, it feels kind of thin in terms of seeing what her day-to-day horrors are, other than, not to say that being locked in a shed isn't terrible, but I'm sure that there is way more abuse going on there that they're letting on.
For
And we don't get a chance to see that in this movie. We only see Bill, who, Cillian Murphy is amazing in this. I think he gives a really amazing performance. He's captivating. He's sympathetic. For me, he's a reason to watch this movie because I think he's just so good. But I feel like that was an element that for me that was missing from this, knowing kind of the broader story. So that's what I said in my review. I spent the whole time thinking, the TV show did it so much better because it was focusing on the people who were hurt the most from this.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you said that. And I agree with you. I do wonder if the choice, in addition to adapting it from the book, but I wonder if also the choice to keep it that way was because of that show, and also because of the early 2000s movie, The Magdalene Sisters, which focuses on, I think, 3 or 4 different girls who are going through the same thing. So that might be why. But still, regardless, I agree. I wish we could have seen more from the victim's point of view, too. The one thing I will say as to why I'm glad we do get such a focus on Bill is that I think it's especially in the times we're in now, where kindness is very much not something that is honored by every member of our society. The cruel times we are enduring right now, it is something that I think empathy and kindness, I think those are things we need to hold on to desperately. And to see a person who is so much that way and have everyone around him just be like, just focus on yourself, just focus on your family, just, put your head down and just ignore what you're saying. And it is, I think, so it's tragic, but I think it is really so easy to just numb yourself and to put your blinders on and not pay attention to the atrocities happening around you. And so to see Bill struggle with that, I think is kind of an important and lovely thing. Having said that, I do completely agree with you that I wish we had seen more from the victim's point of views as well.
Yeah, I wish, but you do raise a good point, and I think that this movie also does that very effectively, showing a man in a patriarchal society starting to notice the patriarchal systems and the misogyny around him in subtle ways. You see him when he's kind of people watching out the window, that, you know, when he can't sleep, he sees the guy who's harassing the woman.
Yes.
Oh.
He sees when that the girl gets dropped, her mom forces her into the convent. He's seeing these moments.
Yeah.
He asks his daughter, have any of the guys at my work been giving you a hard time or saying anything lewd to you or doing anything? Because, like, I'll nip that shit in the bud. So I think it's important to see a man who is seeing these systems around him and having an awakening to them and deciding to do something about it, and to be the person, to be a person that we need, which is more men going out there and putting a stop to this, and doing and making the hard choices and doing the things that are difficult, because it's going to actually get other people to wake up and start to change their behavior.
That's right. Listen to women.
And listen
Although
to
the
Evan's
women in
explanation
this-
there. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, I was going to say, but the women in this movie are infuriating because they're also upholding this patriarchal, sexist system. So,
Yeah.
which does happen. There's, you know, a lot of internalized sexism and misogyny sometimes. So,
Oh boy. I have to confess to you two that I did not watch this as closely as I would normally watch a movie like this, like I did The Quiet Girl, because I just wasn't in the headspace to watch something so gut wrenching. So there are key moments that stuck out to me, like the scrubbing of the floor, finding Sarah in the shed. I'm just calling it a shed. I can't remember if it was a shed or not.
it's a coal shed. Yeah,
It's a
you're
coal
right.
shed. Okay.
Yeah.
The scene with Emily Watson, you know, by the fireplace, you know, Bill in the barber's chair. And I'm kind of thinking, if I went back and watched this again, how much it would just tear me apart watching it more closely. So I want to apologize to our listeners for for only giving this 80% of my attention, because it was just a little too much at the time. So
There's nothing wrong with protecting yourself. Sometimes you got to do that.
yeah, well, you know, it's funny. I went through. I'm sure you all remember, you all being Evan and Megan. I don't remember whether I've said this on the thing. There was a period of time. It's got to be a year, 18 months, where I was like, I don't want to do horror movies.
Yeah.
And I've finally like come away from that. But
Oh, you have?
more, yeah,
That's exciting to me.
yeah. Well, you know, the ones we've been watching lately are, even if they're not good, they are interesting. We were just talking about Black Cab. It's a head scratcher, mostly in not a great way, but at the same time, it's different. I don't know if that's good. I can't recommend it, but I'm glad I saw it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So anyway, this is I just got such Quiet Girl vibes at the beginning of this, and I had watched that again, I don't know, 6 months ago. I can't believe I didn't remember the fucking name of it. It's so obvious. It's The Quiet Girl, that I was just like, ooh, and I kind of tightened up a little bit. So
You clenched. You were like, no.
yeah, I just
Understandably.
yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, ye old Magdalene laundry at the convent. So do we have more to say about, I was going to say about The Quiet Girl, about small things like these?
Well, Quiet Girl's great, but
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. And I actually was thinking as I was watching this movie that it had similar vibes to The Quiet Girl, but as I was watching it, I couldn't remember the name of the movie. So I'm glad that you mentioned The Quiet Girl again.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Does anybody have any final thoughts on not The Quiet Girl, but small things like these?
Just that, Evan, I love what you had to say. So
Yeah.
that was it.
Evan, I
Thanks.
think that you're always very thoughtful about what you say, but this was in particular just really well done, my friend.
Oh shucks. I mean, I think I was just fortunate to have seen that show to have more context.
Yeah.
I find myself watching a lot of TV lately in addition to the movies that we talk about each week, and I felt fortunate that I had seen that show because it gave me a lot of great context in watching this.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's recap. I think it's assured that Megan would say, go see Heretic.
Yes.
I would say pass on Black Cab, I guess. I mean, it's kind of a soft pass, but it's a pass.
It's
think
a
that's
hard
where I come.
pass for me.
Yeah.
Definitely a hard pass for you. Yes. What did you say, Evan?
I think that's where I come down to. It's a soft pass.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it while I was watching it mostly, but yeah, it doesn't add up, and it definitely could have been a lot more focused.
Yeah. Unfocused. That's another good way to describe it. And then finally, I think we would all recommend small things like these. Bring a cup of tea and a box of Kleenex.
Yes, it's an excellent film.
Yeah. It is an excellent film. I do plan to give it. I'm sure I'll be watching it for awards sometime again. So, just because, as much as I like Cillian Murphy, I was like, Oppenheimer, that's the one. So, anyway,
I mean, I'd liked this performance better than his performance in Oppenheimer.
for sure, absolutely, that's what I mean. You know, I can think of 5 or 6 Cillian Murphy performances that I like. Not that I don't like his performance in Oppenheimer. It's just like, okay, this is the big, huge Hollywood movie. I get it, whatever.
Hollywood loves a biopic.
Yeah, they sure do. But anyway, that's that. So we told you what we think of the movies. We want to thank our editor, Otto Clammer, for making us sound great every week. Thank you, Otto.
Thanks, Otto.
Thanks, Otto.
You can find Spoiler Piece Theater anywhere you get podcasts. Our website is spoilerpiece.com. On social media, we're Spoiler Piece Theater on Facebook, and we're at Spoiler Piece on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd. You can email us, spoilerpiece@gmail.com. For example, if you have seen small things like these and it tugged at your heartstrings too, let us know how. And let us know we are not soft. If you like the show, please consider rating and reviewing us. You can go to ratethispodcast.com/spoilerpiece, or you can rate us directly on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. The more reviews, the more people know about us. And if you like the show, please consider joining our Patreon. I mentioned at the top that we talked about John Wick and all the other John Wicks kind of tangentially. And that is the show. My name is Dave Riedel. I write about movies. I'm a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association. And you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, and Blue Sky as Dave Sees Movies.
My name is Evan Crean. I am co-chair of the Boston Online Film Critics Association, co-author of your 80s movie guide, Better Living, and co-host of the It's the Pictures podcast. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, Threads, and Blue Sky as Real Recon, and that's real as in film reel.
And my name is Megan Kearns. I write for Edge Media Network. I'm a co-host of the Slashers podcast. I'm a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association and a member of Gallica. You can follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky at Opinioness World, or on Instagram and Letterboxd at The Opinioness.
Thanks, everyone. See you next week.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.